August, probably in Acton. So any member can take advantage of this. It's a full day free program to help you with the stuff that you do to run your business. Laura's with Torvey, John Torvey with Landy Insurance, and she's going to help out Gitu right now. What's going on, guys?
So, ladies and gentlemen, it's time to pick out the lucky winner for tonight. The lucky winner who's going to get the original proclamation. Let's see who the lucky winner is.
Mix them up. Ron Palesco.
Hey.
And I think do you want to read this part?
No.
He likes to meet and hang out with all of you.
Especially Beth.
Hey, Ron, this is it, the governor's proclamation. So Governor Baker declared the week of February 1st as Mass Society of Enrolled Agent Week. Boy, he went really crazy this year.
Can this help me with speeding tickets?
Yeah, so all of your ideas are going to be used for one of the things the Board of Directors is working on is why are you a member of Mass Society? Generally, it comes down to a taste great, less filling argument. You have this awesome education and you have this tremendous networking opportunities. It all comes together with the monthly meetings. So that is, I think, pretty cool. Laura, you want to tell us something about insurance? Because, guys, the stakes are pretty high.
Okay, so what Landy is a specialist in is your E&O, which is your professional coverage that protects your firm and you. You're protecting your clients by doing their taxes. We're protecting you by providing the insurance for you. It's important to remember with insurance, nobody thinks they're going to do anything wrong, but it's not always that you did something wrong is the reason why you're buying insurance. It's the perception that you did something wrong. You could have a client who just simply did not like that tax bill that he got, and he's really upset. And so he files a claim. You didn't do anything wrong. The taxes were done correctly. He has to pay the bill. He's upset. He's going to file a claim. Your insurance will help defend you. You don't want to be on the hook for the defense of that. That's probably the most predominant reason you should have E&O insurance for what you folks are doing. The other thing right now is your cyber coverages. You have a lot of personal information of the folks you're doing the taxes for. You probably have every single one of the identifying data pieces that are by law that you have to secure. So if you don't have cyber insurance, it is something you should seriously think about doing. You hear about it every day, about people getting hacked into their system. It happens. If you go on Facebook, how many times do you Google something and then you go on Facebook and then all of a sudden you've got an ad there? Somebody is always watching. Somebody can always get in. That doesn't necessarily mean you have a hack in your system, by the way. But it is one of the ways that people have gotten into people's systems is through attachments and videos and things like that. Be very careful. Make sure your employees are very careful. If you are in any way think that the attachment of the link is not legitimate, don't open it. Save yourself that aggravation. But certainly insurance is there to help protect you with that. So those are the things that we do. We can also handle your business owner's business owner's policies, which is your general liability and your property. We support the Mass Association. We're right in Needham. And we do a lot of things by email and phone. So it just, we make it as easy as possible. And the applications we have are 9 questions. So enjoy your evening and thank you.
Thank you, Laura. This is one of the benefits that Landy Insurance gives its policyholders is free CPE. So you get to learn how to do run your business better by just partnering with Landy. You also get a chance to help out your clients if you're partnering up with Gene Hamilton at Task. Hey, Gene, thanks for coming out tonight.
Thanks, John. Thank you. Hi, everybody. I've seen most of you a few times. My name is Gene Hamilton. I'm with a company called Task. And if you folks work with small business people, we can help you. We are a resource for you as we partner with the Mass Society of EAs. We help you folks identify those compliant deductions that can be put on small business healthcare expenses. So if it's a mom and pop, married sole proprietor, C Corp or S Corp, we can save those folks a good amount of money by using a 105 reimbursement program to move their premiums and their out-of-pockets over to the benefit line on the profit and loss statement, saving them federal, state, and FICA. The new QSC-HRA that was signed by President Obama, the Qualified Small Employer HRA, is for those folks that have gotten out, those employers that have gotten out of the group insurance business. It's too expensive. They told people to go out and get individual premiums off the marketplace or individual premiums. And what they've done is they've typically helped them out by grossing up that W-2 wage a little bit. It isn't a compliant way to do it. So that QSE-HRA allows them to utilize, we put the plan document in place to make sure it's compliant and provide them with the summary plan description to adjudicate what they've done to help those employees on individual or marketplace premiums. And then for those folks with employees on group benefits, we can utilize a cafeteria plan or a flex plan under section 125. We put all the plan documents in place. We're going to make sure it's all compliant because we audit guarantee everything we do. We issue debit cards to make those reimbursements easy. Those flex systems also use a debit card. So we make it easy and compliant for you guys. I do not bug anybody until after May 1st. So if you need me, I put a piece of paper with my contact information. Please call me. It's a one-way street. I will help you and your clients. Thank you. Yes, Beth.
I have a QSEHR question, or A. Can you help a client determine how much it's going to cost them to set up that system and then go from there? Or do they need to come to you to say, I'm setting up the system, or can they come and say, can I even afford to set up the system?
I think I can. Thanks, John.
Yeah, but we got the internet.
Oh, okay. So what we determine, that employer gets to choose the amount that they want to help those employees. So the limits have been set at $49.50, and I believe there was a little 2018 adjustment on that. But initially the limits were $49.50 for individual employees and $10,000 for employees with families. So what we do is we talk to that employer and find out what they'd like to reimburse that employee for. We set that up, set that plan document up for them, and then make sure at the end of the year that we're going to put the appropriate paperwork together to make sure that it's adjudicated compliantly. So yes, you tell me what client you need me to help. We'll call them up and make sure that because we audit guarantee everything we're going to do, we're going to make sure it's compliant. Okay. Thanks.
All right. So Gene is just one more of those resources that's available to us. And if he doesn't have the answers or isn't able to help, he knows of other people who provide referrals. So if you have any business without health insurance, it's probably a good contact to touch base with Gene instead of you guys trying to figure out how to handle it, because that's what I do. There's herbal teas and coffee over there in that corner, and behind Barry, there's some kind of chocolate whipped cream cake thing. Please help yourselves to dessert. Speaking of dessert, next month, March 22nd, it's open mic night. That's the share shop where we bring our issues and our worst client cases, and the group all participates as to possible answers. It really is one of the people who come just have a really good time engaging with each other. It's worth your while to take time out. You're also going to get the Mass Society of Enrolled Agent EA Survival Cookbook. And the only way to get one in print is to come to the March 22nd monthly meeting. We're looking for aspiring thespians to get involved with the Mass Society Enrolled Agent Drama Club. We have a tragic comedy in May. The meeting date that month is the unusual May 10th date. So this tragic comedy was successfully debuted at Bentley College last year. It's been revised. A lot has been added to it since then. This is your 2 hours of ethics. You will leave with practice management letters, conflict of interest, disclosure of use. There's a lot of practical stuff that's available. It's more than just a fun time. Anyone who wants to be on stage and participate should let one of the board members know, and we'll get that underway for our May meeting. April is Ted Use. Ted often comes and attends. He's a financial planner to help us out with wealth management. The rules have really changed. We used to worry about taxpayers who had more than $1 million and less than $5 million. Now we worry about more than $1 million and less than 11. Wow. All right. Are you ready, Bob? All right. Bob Allen, this is unbelievable that we have a taxpayer advocate like Bob. We are extremely fortunate. Okay. Bob is working with the Mass Society to have tax day in Massachusetts. Tax day is possibly going to be early in June probably at the Century Bank in Medford, Somerville area, where members can come to schedule an appointment with their worst non-compliant IRS can't pay whatever the issue is, those obstacles and roadblocks that nagged you through the whole filing season that you couldn't possibly put enough time in. There will be someone from the Taxpayer Advocate Service to sit down and resolve the case right there.
Right there, but someone will be there. I don't know if they'll be able to do it right on the spot, but
yes, they are. These guys are really, really good. Are you?
I think it might. Can you guys hear me? Just
okay. So I think.
Work on that. Now? Yes, maybe.
Yeah, we'll get Ravi. So Bob's not in the room in the sound, and we want to make sure the internet webinar people can hear. So let's see if we can do a sound check with that. All right, so this is just killing time. In New Bedford in May, it will be International Tax Day. This is a program that we had in Springfield last fall, and now it's coming in spring to Southeast Mass. There's 4 CPE available, filing a 1040 NR. There's FBAR policies, programs, and procedures. There are some of these IRS banking issues that enrolled agents are not allowed to practice because it's considered the practice of law. There is an hour on visa types, and there's a 4th part I can't think of right away, but those are your thing. Keep an eye on that, then that will be in May.
I think I'm in business.
You sound like you're in
Yes.
business. All right. Bob Allen is not from the IRS. He's sometimes with them, and he's always with us. And Nina Olson has just published a report to Congress,
She has.
and you guys are getting firsthand the latest news on everything.
The latest news on everything. Anyway, okay, I am Bob Allen. I'm the taxpayer advocate in Boston, Massachusetts. I am one of 2 taxpayer advocates in Massachusetts, the other one being Crystal Fortune, and she's located in Andover. I'm gonna, you're all familiar with the taxpayer advocate, I'm gonna guess? Yes, no, maybe? Anyone not familiar? So just a very brief overview then. So as he said, we're not actually part of the IRS. Indirectly, we are inside the IRS, but the way we keep our autonomy is that Nina Olson, who's the National Taxpayer Advocate, who I work under her direction, she was appointed by the Secretary of the Treasury back in 2001, I believe, and she reports directly to Congress. So she issues 2 reports to Congress and does other reporting directly to Congress. And that's how we keep our separation from the IRS. So that's why I don't follow the same rules that everyone else in the IRS follows. And when you work with the Taxpayer Advocate Service, we actually advocate to the IRS for you on your behalf or your taxpayer's behalf. And that's how we do our work. I want to talk about a few things on this PowerPoint. I want to encourage anyone here to ask a question. If you do ask a question, wait for the mic to get over to you. There's a wandering mic, and that's so people that aren't in the room here can actually hear your question because they're listening in. So a little bit of my background here. You can sit down, John. I can hit the button right here. Okay. So anyway, I started my career with the IRS back in 1990. I worked at there used to be a phone site in Boston. And part of my responsibility there, actually a major part of it, for a couple of years, I was that voice at the other end of the practitioner's hotline. If you ever called it, you probably talked to me because I did that in Boston for years. I worked full-time for a couple of years doing the problem resolution program, which is a predecessor to the advocate's office, back before we had an advocate. I did that. In 1994, I crossed over. I became a revenue agent. I did audits throughout the area, all the way up until 2002, where I joined the exam technical services staff. And I took over as the manager there in 2003. And then that's the position I held until about a year ago when I became the taxpayer advocate. So I have a long history in the IRS, particularly in the exam side and the enforcement side. Exam technical services is that part of the IRS that issues the statutory notice of deficiency. There's all the bankruptcy cases, the innocent spouse cases, things like that. And I did all that kind of stuff in my office. So I do have a background there. I've also done extensive teaching in the IRS. I've taught individual tax, corporate tax, flow-through tax to numerous classes of revenue agents that have been hired. I did pretty much did all the training when criminal restitution got put into the tax code, allowed us to assess it as a tax and collect it, training both revenue agents and criminal investigation in that area. So I have a long background. So if you think I probably don't know it, you can ask me. I'm really good at finding out answers too, and I'm happy to do it. So if I don't know the answer today, I can get it for you. Anyway, so now I work for the Taxpayer Advocate. And I'll tell you a little bit about this PowerPoint. I knew a new one was coming out. So when I was first asked to do this talk tonight, I said, yes, wait, I'm gonna get you the PowerPoint, the most recent one when it comes out. So 3 weeks ago, I was in Washington, D.C. for the CAP conference. That's where we talked to the congressman to get us to advocate for tax law changes that benefit taxpayers. And I went straight on vacation from there and didn't come back until Tuesday when I had to get this PowerPoint in. So today was actually the first day I actually even looked at it. So I am going to heavily rely on my notes today because I have not memorized the whole thing. This is Taxpayer Advocate Service. Yes, no, maybe. There we go. I got it. Okay. So what we're going to talk about today is the FAST Act related to passport revocations and denials. We're going to talk about due diligence on EITC and the other refundable credits. We're going to talk about data breaches. We're We're going to talk about serious problems in the tax system, and that's in the annual report to Congress. And we're going to talk about the reporting of the problems with the tax system. And I will take any other question you have as well. So raise your hands when you want to ask them. If you think of a question, you can make a little note of it and ask at the very end if you'd rather do it that way. Okay, the FAST Act, this is from 2015. This is the law that requires the denial of an individual's passport if they're seriously delinquent in their taxes. So at the time, when the law was passed, it was a serious tax that was defined as anyone that owes $50,000 or more, okay? This tax already has to be assessed, so it can't be like a proposed deficiency or anything like that. And I'm gonna refer to the notes here because it's got a couple of details about it. So the debt, hang on 1 second, sorry about that. Off. Okay, serious delinquent debt. Okay, it has to be assessed. This is part about a lien.
So you were standing here, we were okay.
Okay,
So we're gonna stand here.
that's fine with me. Sorry about this. I read this through and wanted to get the actual words on it, but anyway, the tax has to be assessed. They've had to go through the whole collection due process and have the time period expire for them to be able to file for a collection due process hearing. That has to be gone, or they would have to have been subject to a levy, and that's when it become a serious debt. As I said, it started out at 50,000. It's already up to 51,000 due to inflation. So currently, it started in January 21st. The first names were released to the Department of State. So the IRS has a certification process where they certify that the taxpayer actually owes more than $51,000. And they send it off to the State Department. And as it stands now, the State Department is only not giving out new passports to those people. They're not revoking anyone's passports at this time, but that is on the horizon probably. They did about 1% of the eligible people to start with, which is somewhere between 3,500 and 4,000 people, to see how it works. We have major issues with this. We don't think it's appropriate for a lot of reasons. Part of it is that the taxpayers don't really, might not know this is going to happen to them. It's a new law. They get one paragraph in their collection due process hearing notice that they get when they owe a lot of money. It's one little paragraph, and it's kind of buried saying that your passport could be revoked or you could be denied a passport. That's the only notification they get ahead of time. And then they'll finally get one when they say, when the IRS will send out a separate notice saying you've been certified as having delinquent debt to the State Department. And by then it's too late for the taxpayers to fight this. Now there's a Supreme Court case that goes back to 1958 that talks about the fact that the ability to travel is one of the rights of the citizens, and that these are being curtailed without any due process whatsoever. They aren't being notified of it. So we have a real issue with this. If you have taxpayers that are running into the situation, I strongly encourage you to contact us. We'll do everything we can to assist. So what's happened to this point is all the cases that the Advocate's Office has had up to this point, we've had the issue. We've had them, Nina Olson issued a directive, an assistance order to the commissioner, and they agreed to put those aside for now. But it's not happening automatically. Hopefully at some point, will get them to take the cases, these passport cases off the list automatically, but we'll wait and see. So what happens when if they do get their passport revoked, you all understand how time consuming it can be to get your tax liability changed, or even if you pay it off. So if you're disputing the tax and you have to go through audit reconsideration or anything like that, that can take months. And then what will happen is the adjustment will get finally posted to the taxpayer's account. And then, and you know, that computer system we use is very old, so everything takes weeks longer than you think it should. And then at the end of the month is when they're going to certify it. And the same thing if someone actually pays their tax. So if someone comes in and pays the IRS what they owe so they can get a passport, it's not like you can pay it on Thursday and go get your passport on Friday. No, you're going to pay it on Thursday. It's going to take a couple of weeks for this payment to post, be full paid, and then at the end of that month, or you know, whenever that happens, could be 3 weeks later, then they'll tell the State Department that you no longer owe the money, and then you'll be able to get your passport. So there could be very long delays if someone's in a rush to get a passport or something. You have a question over here?
So if you have a client, and I'm sure this is hypothetical, who has not been filing tax returns and then in December filed a whole bunch, but also in 2017 got married to a woman who is not a US citizen, so she leaves the country often.
Okay.
And now they're about to file a tax return jointly. He owes a ton of money and he's going to owe a ton of money again. We should probably not want her to file jointly if the cumulative year, 1 year or successive years will break 50,000 or she won't be leaving the country anymore.
Okay, well, okay, so in your particular situation, you're saying you have a joint tax return for several years with balances, just 1 year?
Single for several years, and
Right.
now they're about to file joint. Maybe I should tell her not to file joint.
Okay, so so it's whether or not an individual owes more than 50,000. She's not liable for the previous years. She will be liable for the current year. So as long as the current year isn't more than 50,000, she won't be affected by the law. Only he would be affected if that's what you're saying under this situation.
But if it's about 26,000 each year,
Yeah.
then if she does it this year, she shouldn't file jointly next year because then she'll kick over. So we just got to keep an eye on that.
Well, she could kick over, but she's going to kick over if she files separately too, perhaps. I don't know what your situation is exactly.
Oh,
But anyway,
no, okay.
you got to think about it.
But we have to think this
Yeah.
through, and then there's interest and penalties, and is that part of the 51,000? So even if it's 1 year at 40,000, well, I mean, it doesn't go that fast, but you know what I mean? It could
I'm going to say
kick.
the penalty is, but I'm not so sure about the interest. I would actually have to look into that, and I can. But once you're getting into that scary situation, when you're getting close to it, there are ways to avoid getting put on that list. The first one is if you have an installment agreement set up, that's what this IA stands for. So if you're in an installment agreement, you don't get certified as being delinquent because you're paying it off. The other thing, if you have an accepted offer in compromise, you won't get certified, and so you're okay that way. The emergency humanitarian service circumstances, that's all State Department, that's not us. So I can't even really go into that part, but that is one of the things. If you have a collection due process hearing pending, that's a situation where you won't get certified. As I said before, it has to be 51,000. It has to be after your CDP rights have passed. Okay. The other one is if you have filed an innocent spouse claim while it's still pending. And then if later on, if it's determined that you're an innocent spouse, then you're removed from that liability. You have another question in the back there?
Is non-collectible?
Currently non-collectible. I believe those are considered serious delinquent.
Because I have one that's over 100,000.
Yeah, that's probably one that's gonna. I'm 99% sure that is one of the cases that can get turned over. I'll make sure, if you want to just put down your question and I'll make sure I get an answer to you directed to that one. I have a question further back too.
My client travels internationally to generate his revenue.
Yeah.
He's a subchapter S corporation. We file his tax return every year. He owes a bundle.
Yeah.
And he called me, he said, I heard that they can keep your passport And am I not going to be able to get back into the United States? And I said, no, I think if they get you in the United States, they're going to keep you here. And, but I'm concerned because although we're trying to negotiate an installment agreement, he can't pay the tax, but he's still generating revenue. When I put my foot down, told him to go on salary with his own company so he could avoid some of the lack of withholding. But I am concerned about him. Now, what I heard you say, if I heard it correctly, is that they're not pulling passports, they're just not honoring applications. Is that correct?
That's correct. As of now, okay, you know, as I said, they're required to deny new passports. It's optional whether or not they're going to revoke or limit anyone's passport after the fact. And that decision, I don't think has been made. The IRS is reporting the information as required to the State Department. So I think that decision of whether or not they actually go there is going to rely inside the State Department. I don't know what the procedures are going to be exactly.
Have we had a challenge in the Supreme Court? I think it's the 14th Amendment to the Constitution, article of the Constitution for due process. Has anyone challenged that in the Supreme Court yet?
Well, you
actually?
know, so January 21st was the first reporting. So I don't actually know of anyone that's actually had their passport denied, their application denied yet. I mean, we're only a month into it. So for something to be argued in court, it actually has to progress to a certain point. So,
but I'm more concerned about him having the flexibility of traveling to and from so that he can generate his revenue to ultimately pay his tax.
So all I can strongly suggest in your client's situation is to make sure if he does owe an excess of $51,000, to make sure he tries to get into an installment agreement set up, you know, to avoid getting turned over to the state, certified to the state.
Are you going to be discussing liens?
I was not actually going to talk about liens tonight, but I could.
Could you right now?
What would you like to know?
My client has a lien placed on them 2/18/18. I'm sorry, it expires on 3/19. That's the last date for filing. But the actual tax return has gone past the CSED, so it's not collectible.
So you're saying that the 10 years, the 10-year collection statute is expired on this?
Yes.
And there's still a lien filed?
And there's still a lien that is on the books, and the refiling date is not until 3/19/19. And so I'm concerned that if the lien is still on the books, then it's still enforceable as a debt. Am I incorrect?
I believe once the 10-year statute passes, they can't collect it. That 10-year statute does get extended for different reasons. I don't know if your particular client has any of those reasons.
No, there's no extension.
There's nothing that would have extended it under
The
any
CSED
circumstances.
has definitely taken this tax into the uncollectible
Then it
status.
should automatically fall off. The balance should fall off and the lien will get removed automatically as well.
Will it be
that
automatic,
all
or
he
do I
owes
have to
on?
make a phone call?
What?
Does it get automatically removed, or
It
do I have to make
should.
a phone call?
So he still believes there's a lien filed to now.
Well, we know there's a lien
Okay.
filed. I've got a copy of the lien, and it said the refiling date is not until 2019. So I'm
Okay.
concerned.
And when was the 10-year statute up?
It was up October of
October?
2017, yeah.
Yeah, but you know, if it hasn't been removed as of yet, have you
Well-
contacted the IRS at all on it, or?
No, I don't want to open the door.
I think maybe
Yeah.
we can take this offline.
Okay.
For after.
We will.
maybe? Is that okay?
We can look into it too.
All right,
Okay.
thank you.
Any other?
I just have one question.
Sure.
Well, actually, I have two. The first one is, why was this put into place? Maybe, I mean, my question this year to arch the whole year is,
Yeah.
I'm asking why things happen. So I'm just curious as to, did they think these were flight risks or what? I mean.
I'm not actually even sure where the idea came from, to be honest. I don't, and I do now pay more attention to bills that get filed. This actually, you know, the FAST Act is fixing America's surface transportation. It really wasn't a tax act to begin with, that they threw this in. So I'm not really sure the background of who put it in or why they wanted it in there or whose vote they were trying to get to pass this other whatever happened. I don't know what would actually happen there. It is a useful collection tool. I think someone believes that is a useful collection tool for the IRS. Any other questions on this before I move on? Okay, I explained the certification process. So what's really hard, to, at least inside, so when the IRS is certifying it, they're certifying that the taxpayer actually owes a debt, not that they're free and clear, that's certified. And I kind of mix that up sometimes. So the reversal certification is when they no longer owe the debt. And that, as I said, is done after it's paid off. I do not believe it's once they just drop below the 50,000. Once they get certified, they're gonna have to work to get the whole thing done or get an installment agreement. So I talked about the concern of the timings of the notices. As I said, that one little blurb buried in the collection due process hearing notice they get. I can see that if a taxpayer gets gets this notice from the IRS, they may not read it in its entirety, so they might not be aware of it, or might not think of it. They might just see the amounts at the top of the page and say, so they never know what's happening. We've asked that IRS perhaps consider not giving some of those cases over, and those cases are the ones that we're working on. We'd like to be able to, because most people that come to our office are trying to resolve a disputed liability anyway, or to make some type of payment arrangement. That hasn't happened yet. We're still optimistic that it may happen. And then there's also, people can have a hearing after their CDP rights have expired, and those people aren't being excluded either at this time. Some people just miss that they have like a year to file and they're not doing it timely. So, but if they're still disputing it, we think they should not get certified. Okay, next up is EITC Earned Income Tax Credit Due Diligence. Okay, and now includes the, it's been expanded, so it includes the child tax credit, the additional child tax credit, and the American Opportunity Tax Credit. So there's a penalty for preparers. It's per credit per return, and now it's kind of like that previous one went from 50,000 to 51,000. This one from 500 to 510. So it's $510. It's subject to inflation. So it's 510, and if you have all three credits, that's $1,530 per return. So you want to do your due diligence when people are claiming these credits. I know you've seen a lot about the declining audit rate in the IRS, how it's gone over the last. It had gone down to 0.9%. Now the latest figure says 0.7%. That's the actual audit rate where people like revenue agents and tax compliance officers are conducting an audit. It doesn't include everything else that's done. And a lot of these things are done during processing and through correspondence before they actually give out the refund. So if someone makes a mistake, like math error type of thing, where there's a social security number missing or something like that, and they hold these off, that affects a large number of returns. So the number of returns actually get looked at by the IRS each year is closer to 6.2% of the returns. So a huge, huge, huge amount of those are these tax returns here. They're going through the verification of when they're filed, matching up the W-2s and things like that. And they also, a lot of the identity theft cases get thrown in there too as well and stuff. So I'm just letting you know that even though there's no one auditing anymore, it seems like there's still a lot of people looking at these tax returns. We're gonna have a question in the back too, okay? So what you wanna do is make sure that you are applying due diligence. And we see a lot of these cases, people that have had earned income credit disallowed. And I'm gonna give you a couple of examples too. I just wanna cover the due diligence.
On the due diligence,
Yep.
if the taxpayer qualifies for all of the things that we're talking about, and I haven't done my due diligence, am I still going to get hit with a penalty?
If you haven't, well, first of all, if the taxpayer is denied the credit, then if you
And
haven't,
I haven't done my due diligence.
if you haven't done your due diligence, then
Then
you're
I'm in trouble.
responsible.
Okay.
No one stops a taxpayer from getting the credit, then no, you're not held responsible.
Okay,
But-
so if they qualify, and I know that they qualify, and I don't do what you're calling the due diligence, and they qualify, and there's no problem with them, then I don't have to worry about a penalty.
Correct, but I'm going to encourage you to do your due diligence. And let me just read some of this first, and I'll go through that. Okay. Told you how the penalty applies to each credit. So paid tax return preparers will be required to certify that they have confirmed their client's eligibility for each of the credits on Form 8867, Pay Preparers Checklist. Prior to the new law, Form 8867 was required solely for EITC and submitted with each tax return containing the credit. The form now includes a child tax credit, additional child tax credit, American Opportunity Tax Credit as part of the checklist procedure. So this is a quick refresher that we're going to do on due diligence. You want to check the income. Of course, you're going to see that on the tax return anyway. That's $53,505 for a married couple with 3 or more children. Lesser amounts if they have fewer kids. And then, okay. As mentioned earlier, client spouse, or anyone claiming for EITC must have Social Security numbers that are valid for employment. Okay. The PATH Act prevents you and the taxpayer from filing retroactive returns or amended claims claiming EITC, child tax credit, or the other credit, if the reason you're filing is because you now have the valid taxpayer identification number required for each credit. So they have to have it by April 15th. So you can't go back and not have the information. Then if they get the information after April 15th, you can't amend the return. You can't claim it on delinquent return either, if they didn't have the number. It includes extension. So if for any reason your client or client's family member did not receive a valid taxpayer identification number, a valid taxpayer identification number could be an SSN, ITIN, or ATIN, depending on the requirement for each credit. By the due date of the tax return, including extensions, they cannot file a past due tax return or amended return to claim any of these credits. Okay, for EITC, valid identification number means if anyone on the return doesn't have an SSN that's valid for employment by the due date of the return, a valid extension, you cannot file a past due return or an amended return. Okay, so what you want to do, and there's some common errors here. These are the other requirements. They can't have like foreign income. So the mistakes we have is claim a child who doesn't meet the residency or relationship requirements. There's a lot of people out there, that may have different living situations than what most of us are used to. I can tell you there's a particular case that's in our office right now where we have someone who has tried to claim the earned income credit. They established the relationship, fine. And the big issue here is residency. Where does the child live? And where does the parent live? And they're both saying they live in Everett. Although the parent has been using Revere, which is her mother's address, on her tax returns because she gets better mail service there. She's not afraid of someone taking her mail. So that's why she's putting everything there. So the dispute is, where does she actually live? So now you might understand, like, oh yes, I know this, but you want to make sure that the address is matching up, because if she's got a tax return on W-2 saying Revere, we're saying you live in Revere, you can't take a child that's going to school in Everett saying that, he lives in Everett. So you run into these situations. So you really want to ask, where do you live? Where does the child live? Make sure that they're getting their information correct. So what happens is these returns get kicked out. They're going to ask for this information. They're going to prove that the child lived with you, and by school records or medical records or something. So you want to make sure that they're consistently correct addresses. It's got to match up. Sure.
We have a question from the webinars right here.
Okay.
Are there IRS worksheets for clients to use. The worksheet prepares isn't comprehensive to the clients, so I created some of my own, which, I'm sorry, what are people doing to do due diligence, especially if it's not in person? This is from Joyce.
You're supposed to fill that form, the 867, and asking.
Yeah, but I think
everything.
what Joyce is saying, that's more for the preparer.
Yeah.
So
If
which
you-
is not really comprehensible by the client.
You know, well, first of all, you want to have these discussions a little bit as preparers with your clients, because as like that example I gave you, she's not thinking that she's not living with her child, and she's not understanding how she's going to have to show it to the IRS. Do you know what I mean? So you really, that's why you want to be having these conversations, to make sure that people understand how they're going to get tripped up. We don't want people getting tripped up on this. So you want to say, where do you live? Where's your child live? Is this where you're getting your mail? Is this the address I'm putting on the tax return? Like that. You want to have consistency there. Like, just who knows that you live there? Does the school know this is where the child lives? You know, or any other type of reasoning they can get, something to show that the child lives with you. Because it's not just, you know, lots of the cases we get tripped up is where multiple people are trying to claim the child, but no one's claiming the child except for this one person, and that she's still having trouble. And this could very well be one of those cases that actually succeed in overturning. You know, I'm running out of options about how to prove that she lived there. No, not paying the utility bills. It's under another relative's name. So situations that come up times, you know, and sometimes people can't even get credit to get utilities and stuff like that. So.
Thank you. How do you prove due diligence for a couple in the process of divorce, where one spouse has to certify that she has not lived with the other spouse for a period of 6 months, and she qualifies as an abandoned spouse to file head of household? I mean, I can say all that, but how does it get proved? How does it qualify for meeting due diligence requirements?
Very good question, actually. You want to ask the questions, you want to notate your answers without a doubt. Because for due diligence, you want to ask how she's going to prove that at one particular time is, you know, is another situation. If it is questioned. We do see lots of, as I have a long exam background before this, and we saw many situations where we have two spouses still living together and trying to go head of household, claiming the kids together, and we'd see that routinely. I do know it's looked at, so you really want to be careful. Things you want to things that kind of trip, if you want to say, people up on that issue is where they're both getting the W-2s mailed to the same address. Things like that gets seen. Lots of times you'll see one of them with a box and one without a street address, but they turn around and have to change to a street address because they gave up their PO box or something. And there's automatic flagging that goes through some of those cases. We have both social security attached on a return usually. All previous files.
So I think this is so I've done a lot of research in this area. I'm actually in the process of writing an article. I did my graduate thesis on EITC fraud.
Great.
So I'm not an expert in this area, but a lot of reading in this area. And it seems like so I did my thesis a long time ago in 2011, and a lot of the due diligence has been put in place since then. So it has reduced the amount of fraud that was happening in the early 2000s and in the late 90s. However, I agree with Nate, I agree with Joyce, and I think especially you're coming from TAS.
Yep.
They do a really poor job, the IRS, of actually giving examples of what you should have as documentation. I think that's sort of what we're all asking. And I know
Yeah.
every situation is different. But to prove with the documentation, and I know we're talking utility bills and everything, I think these situations are so difficult because of that very thing. So we do contemporaneous interviewing with questions and answers.
You should be talking to the taxpayers and getting the information. You should be recording the result.
Yeah,
so you should be asking the taxpayers not what is your filing status, but say, are you married? And or have you been married? You know, and if they say, are you still married or not? And then find out are they living together, then determine whether or not they qualify for head of household or not, rather than say I'm head of household. You have to actually ask those questions to make the answers right.
Right.
And then you have to ask about each of the children and stuff like that. Well, you know, what are the dates that the child lived with you and stuff like that. And you should be notating this information. You know, you're not putting it on that form necessarily, but you're keeping a file on the taxpayer. So you can go back and say, no, I did this.
Right.
I asked it. This is what they told me.
Okay.
You know, you're covering yourself. Now, whether or not the taxpayer is going to turn around and get questioned as well.
That's what I'm saying on the
that's a different matter. It doesn't affect you as directly.
Right,
However, you want to look out for your clients as well, and you want to be able to help them. So there are certain things like when we're asking about the children, that's usually the hardest thing. Usually it's a preschool. We ask for medical records that show the address of the child. And then usually the child is in school, they look for school records. And we have actually sample letters on our website that you can download that says, we send them out to taxpayers, say, use the letter to make the schools. It says, yes, the student at the school lived at this address on this date, lived at this address on this date.
Okay.
So we can show that it's been more than 7 months, more than 6 months in a calendar year. So we actually follow up on that kind of stuff, and we try to help establish that. And sometimes you have to go a little bit more unusual about did you move and stuff like that, and try to find other things that show that they actually did moving to a particular.
Yes, I see a lot of mistakes have been made with claiming the children of separate parents live in separate homes for more than the 6 months, all that too.
Yeah, I mean, there was a lot of, there were custody issues. We know there is, and normally former spouses don't necessarily see eye to eye anymore. So there's always just who's getting the child and stuff like that. So you really, they really want to start, you encourage your clients to make their case that they actually have a child living with them. They can go by a custody agreement if they have one. They should keep calendars if they want to show how often. If they really have something being contested, I suggest to them that they really mark it down on a calendar when they have the child all the time.
Well, I just want to remind everybody first that it's only going to get worse if they're adding head of household to it. But can we talk about name and Social Security number? I changed her divorce. Changed her name with Social Security in December and has a new card, and the IRS still does not have her new name.
Really?
Conveniently, I had 2 powers of attorney with the old name and the new name. But yeah, so I was just curious, do you know the normal time frame? Because I don't even know how
I thought it was pretty quick that we got notified, because we get updates from Social Security on a weekly basis. So we see that on a regular basis coming up. We just, because then, we don't get the full name, we get the first 4 digits of the name control, we call it, from Social Security. So it should show up in a relatively quick time. We changed it. But one of the other very big mismatches we have, there's a lot of people, Latin, Hispanic people who use, will often add their mother's maiden name after their last name. Make sure when you have that you're actually using their last name, and then you can put the mother's maiden name after that. But make sure that that the real last name is being put in the last name box, and then, so we pick up that is actually the last.
Yeah, that problem too. But what do you do if you're trying to file? Should I just file the wrong name? If it kicks back from the IRS, should I just file the wrong name? Or paper file?
Well,
but I'm scared paper file will just cause a problem.
You can do it either way, to be honest. You can put the new name, it might get tripped up, might get held for a short while. So, or you can do the old name until it does catch up. If you do the old, think if it's a direct deposit, it's probably not going to be an issue. The bank is probably going to take it if they knew what her previous name was. And that's the way most people are getting their refunds nowadays is through a direct deposit. Any other questions on that? So all this. So make sure that you actually really try to talk to the taxpayers.
Hi.
Hi.
I have a hard time to fill out that form.
Okay.
And it almost like IRS wants to know whether the tax preparer was present when they have convinced the kid at the time, means they had sex actually. And from that point onward, how do you disprove something? Like who would take your kid away? Would anybody feed your kid for 18 years and say, okay, now lead to what and build the kid? Because is the kid unmarried? Can't you figure it out based on the age? You don't get married.
Well,
how do you prove whether the kid is married or unmarried?
That actually usually is not an issue whether the child is married or not. That is not something I've actually ever seen come up. I know it is. I know the child's not supposed to be married to someone else, but that doesn't come up as frequently as a lot of the other problems come up. It's very hard to make a law that applies to everybody, and that's why so many people get tripped up because people who made these laws were thinking, you got a mother, you got a father, you got two kids that live in the same house. End of story. It doesn't work that way anymore, for a lot of people. So what you have lots of times is you might have these non-traditional relationships. You have a lot of parents that aren't married to each other to start with. And that's one that comes up a lot. And whether they're living together or whether they're not living together, whether one's supposed to claim and not. So sometimes you'll have the two people living together and the one who makes the most money is supposed to be the one claiming the child, and they get tripped up that way. You get you could have a situation where you have a teenager that has a child, and then you have the parent as their own. So it's the grandparents actually claiming the child, and that happens a lot too.
You have a social security number, so as soon as
we have records of who. Yeah, I mean, it does have information about who the parents are. We'll see a social security number. You can see who the parents' social security numbers are and stuff like that. So there's a way to check that. But a lot of times when you have if it's your child, it's very easy to show that to the IRS. You probably don't question whether it's your child. It's when it's not actually your child. When it's like, it could be your nephew or someone that you're trying to claim because your brother can't hear a kid,
It takes me almost 45 minutes to go through all these questions.
And it's going to take your taxpayer a lot longer to straighten it out if they get caught. Yeah. But you really have to have a little bit of conversation. Who the is, and guaranteed these forms take a little longer on your year of work with a client, but after you get to know the client, it's a little bit easier to be able to say, has this changed? Has this changed? Hopefully, but you do want to pay attention. I've seen a number of situations with, I hate to use bad preparers. You come through my office at one time or another, penalty situations, my old office, I should say. So it does happen. People do get penalized for these. And lots of times what happens during the course of the audit, these taxpayers get audited and they're disallowing these. They'll ask them, well, why'd you do this? And the preparer told me that this is what I qualify for. When they say, oh, okay, well, we're prepared to see if they apply due diligence. I got to tell you, they're probably going to go pull a bunch of your returns at the same time and say, well, we'll look at these too to make sure you did them all right. So.
Can I just say one more thing?
Sure.
And then I think that's where the fault of the software comes in a little bit, because it'll trigger EIC when you don't even know it. You'll look back up on page 2 and you're just like, yes, to make sure that this is being done. And some software perhaps are required to pro series do it until they're ready. Until you do this. Okay. Yeah, it's for check. And I know CH is doing it too. So,
we're estimated about $56 billion in filing year 2015. That's so there's a lot, dollars is made improperly. The cause of child residence and requirements. The biggest dollar amount is the claiming a child who's not their qualifying child, whether it's related more than half a year. Identified is incorrectly reporting income or expenses, particularly Schedule Cs, accounts for 20 to 32% of the dollars on approximately 65% of the returns. We have a question over there. I'm going to elaborate while you're getting the mic over there. So you will, huge problem. There are people that make us and this is my expenses if they have any, and trying to max out the exact dollar amount to get the most. It happens. You ask people and tell you automatically. And the reason it's gone down is because so many people have gotten questioned about it and ban claiming it again, 10-year bans. But if they a record of the income, a list of their clients that they're charging, whatever it is, they have to have some at some point.
Statistic, almost 20% of those inappropriately claimed.
Right.
Do you have any way to break down percentages for returns prepared or folk are keep them out?
I don't actually have those numbers. I could try to find them. I'm not sure if I'd be able to. I don't know what the breakdown is.
And most are coming from unenrolled preparers. But the other thing I wanted to point out here is that when I did my research in 2011, it was 51 in fraudulent and error EITC refunds.
Yeah.
So they have brought this number down by half.
Yeah, so that number, when you're referring to the older number, that around the time, this is prior to the PATH Act, this is prior to W-2 matching and things like that.
Yeah.
We were getting a lot of stolen identity returns back then. I think that skewed those numbers very high back then.
Before that time, and I'm sorry but there were a lot of people doing fraudulent things as far as preparers that they did jail and everything. So.
Oh yeah, there were those in the back there. I'll give you an example of that same time frame there, because again, I worked for them. They had a gang that was down in Florida, in Miami, who gave up their traditional type of work and went to Puerto Rico to sell life insurance. And policies, and they would get people's names, social security, file tax returns. my and deal the on that. And hundreds of the first assessments, and a lot of that has to do with the same type of thing, where people would go out and file return after return after return. So they did 100 returns, $5,000 each. Each one of those that's $5,000, and then the preparer did them all, or the person who masterminded ended up having to pay the whole bill on top of that. So it's a lot.
I am not in auditing clients. When they come some land, I might question it.
Yeah.
But for the most part, I'm not audit my client. I'm not going to turn and say, get books and records. I'm not going to say, did you record all your income? I'm going to say, is there anything I want to do? Because I don't want to assume that they're lying to me. Not going to climb in 20 or 30 years. When I know that client, I know their level of integrity, I'm not going to sit there and interrogate them. That's not what my job is. My job is to prepare a tax return, not to audit them. And I don't doubt that there are irreputable preparers out there who just take anything and put it down. I know I've represented them on practitioner violations, and they were not enrolled agents. And I had to do my due diligence with them.
Right.
But I'm not interested in auditing my clients. If you want to audit them, come ahead, and we'll show the receipts. And
Well,
we'll show
I'm just letting you know why you want to do due diligence, especially with these credits are concerned. Talking about you have clients for a number of years. That it's not big on to be questioning because it's a very simple, basic stuff. But if you're sitting there and you have this client for 20 years and you know where they're living and how they're living and everything else, and their income is $20,000 on a Schedule C net profit, you can probably say, you know what, this probably isn't right. That's when you should be doing a better attempt at due diligence. You're asking for trouble on something like that. If you can look at it and say, this doesn't look right, then that's when you want to really pay attention. You have a reasonable time to say yes and no. But a lot of times you have to actually look and you'll have an idea whether or not someone is actually living on what they're actually saying they're living on. Better than someone in the IRS is going to have it. So you should actually, it's easier for you to recognize when you should be better due diligence than other times. Because you know the people walking in your door. Okay, sorry. And the last thing was the Social Security number mismatch into the records. And we already talked about that, especially remember if you have people that are adding on a mother's maiden name at the end, make sure that you get the right last name in the last name box. Okay, data breaches. And I wish the insurance woman was still here, to be honest. This is a big deal. We see it all the time. So you have a lot of information, and this goes, I get to tell you, it's widespread. It's identity theft has gone leaps over what it used to be. There's a huge market. So they go after employers, they go after preparers, and by they, it can be some hacker doing everything on their own. It could be one of your employees. It could be one of your temp employees or something like that coming in. All this information, I'm taking it. Disgruntled employees, forms, anything. It happens. So you have all this information. You got to protect it. Do your best you can to protect it. Sometimes your loss, some can intentionally get it, or they can unintentionally find it. You could maybe you have stuff that was supposed to be shredded that wasn't shredded, and someone just grabs it, finds it. And says, "Oh, I'm not with this." I think people have a better idea of what to watch out for. But you always see that, and if you have a data breach, it's a really huge issue. And they get all your clients, all their financial information, their bank accounts, everything. They have it all because you deposit whatever they're doing, interest, anything like that. They have all information available to them, and they can really run I got to tell you, if you have any breaches at all, you really have to report it right away. Timing is of the essence. We have a stakeholder liaison as the first person that's married. I think many of you know who she is. Honestly, if you just go on irs.gov and type in data breach, all the information is going to show up exactly what to do. But you want to do it right away because you want to protect yourself and you want to protect your clients. What happens is especially if you know, even if you don't, we can go through and the IRS can filter out tax returns that you've done in the past and protect those taxpayers from having it done again. So we don't issue fraudulent refunds. It turns out it's not bad for the IRS, as bad for the IRS, it's bad for your clients in particular because they get stuck. And if you aren't very proactive about it, you're probably going to lose your clients too. So it's really serious, especially if someone comes and gets all the information out of your computer. So you want to make sure it happens to everybody. You know, I know last year, locally we had, I know there was a couple of businesses that were hit. You know, people like, you know, posing as someone else in the company saying, oh, I need the, you know, I need the W-2s now. And someone would just W-2s and all of a sudden they have all and that people get the letters. You have to come into the IRS office to show who you actually are because we have more than one return. We have to know which one's you. I've seen returns. There's one of the schools that was hit. I was working with one of the executives at one of the local universities, and I gotta tell you, I looked at the return, and it had had the employer information. It had the wages to within $1,000, and this is like, you know, large six-figure salary. Within $1,000, had the withholding into about 400. They had guessed that closely on it. And it was put aside as a potential fraudulent return, and it wasn't hers. She hadn't filed it, you know. People just grab that money very easily. You know, I mean, a lot of the money just goes to debit cards now. And that's why it's so widespread. So what happens left and right, I can't tell you how many, and it's a big headache for the IRS, it's a big headache for everyone involved. You really got to be careful with your information and make sure you report as fast as possible.
Is the IRS going to be doing anything about issuing a PTN for fraud?
So the IRS does issue PTNs, PTNs, something. They're yes. You know, they do it to people who have filed the form 14039. That's the theft affidavit. They file that, they get one of these numbers. Also, if they live in Florida or Georgia, automatically get one of those numbers because that area for fraud in those two states. So they get a lot of it. They get the numbers automatically. There are different proposals coming around. And people are trying to come up with how they can actually stop it. You know, I mean, like actively trying to figure out what can be done. So I was 2 weeks ago, I was here we go to Washington, D.C. to meet with our congressman to on the suggestions made by the National Taxpayer Advocate to see if we can get changes in the law implemented. And this year we were concentrating on there's IRS reform in the works. Should be announced by April 17th. So we're really pushing for different types of reform that we want. You know, and I know this kind of issue had come up about what to do and stuff like that, identity theft. And you know, every single time you come up with something here, there's like good parts and there's negatives to it. One was to get rid of the use of debit cards, and you know, really unfortunate that there's such a large unbanked population. And it coincided with it was like a week after Bank of America announced they're going to charge $12 a month for all these checking accounts for people who didn't have a minimum balance. you know, and you can, if you might be able to afford it, but there are people who can't. You know, you just have to face the facts. And these people rely on these debit cards. One of those that is getting serious consideration is maybe making it so the IRS actually, well, if you already have a debit card with Social Security, the IRS do a debit card just for your refunds. And that's the only way you can get a refund is to be worth it. Do it on our SAM site, which we'll talk about a little bit later.
Well, first, the idea is that currently your social security number is both your username and your password, right? It's your ID, it's your secret number. So everybody needs an actual password to get their identification number, your social security number and a password. So that's why I think everybody deserves an ID PIN. But you said that Florida and Georgia are automatically getting it.
They have 3 or 4 years, I think.
I have heard a client and has never had a PIN, and I've never
Really?
had it rejected. Yeah.
I ask for it. You ask for everybody couldn't just get it.
Let me, one who didn't speak yet.
I had a client that her identity was stolen. She called the IRS, police reports followed. She asked for one of the PIN numbers. They refused to give it to her.
Did she file the Form
She's
49?
filed.
Really?
Everything's, yes.
And they wouldn't give her one?
They would not give her one. They told her to file her return as soon as possible. Luckily, the husband wasn't taken. But business.
Her ID was stolen, but it wasn't used to file a fraudulent tax return.
Not yet.
Yeah, they only do it if you had been fraudulent tax filed. No.
I'll suggest anyone who's having IPIN contact S.Hanson, HANSON @irs.gov. Thank you.
Judy?
So, if you actually have clients that have had their identity stolen and they try to work with the IRS and can't get it resolved, we will help them. Unfortunately, it's at the stage now where the IRS has a whole unit set up just that works nothing but identity theft cases. It's huge. It's out of Philadelphia. It's one of the biggest functions right now. It's that widespread. So we work with them on a regular basis.
I've noticed lately in calling the practitioner hotline and our attorney for a particular client, they then go and interrogate me about my name, my date of birth, my social security number, my full name. I'm sure they're going to ask me for my birthmark, but I'm a little concerned because I'm comfortable giving that information out when I'm working on a client. I should be allowed.
Is we've had fraudulent 2048s filed, and it's an issue now. Believe it or not, people are calling up to get information about clients. So they file a 2848 to get the rest of the information that they don't have, so then they can proceed.
If I'm on the phone with practitioner hotline, and my client owes $300,000 taxes, and I'm trying to get information, someone would be a damn fool to try and steal that identity.
I know, but as I said, I can understand what you're saying, but I got to say, even in our office, we're required now to verify the preparer that's calling in. So they are asking for your social security number, and unfortunately, it's just the way it is. Because well, if you're calling the IRS, you know who you dialed. And if the person on the phone is asking just to verify your social security number, they're not writing it down. They're looking at a screen to make sure you're telling them the right number. So, you know, I'm sorry. It's not like the IRS is calling you. You don't know who is at the other end of the phone. You call them. I mean, you have to, some faith, they have everything on you already. You know what I mean? She's already looking at the number. I mean, So don't worry about that part. I wouldn't, you know.
I just got to say, I wanted to say I support the IRS in this. Every time you have this client sign a 2848, they see your CAF, they see your PIN, they see your EA number. They have the information, and I have always been shocked. Some of them will ask for copies of the power of attorney, and when you sign it, but you can't get a copy of it, and they're walking out the door with the information. And I've always been shocked that there was no. So I actually think I don't have a problem with it. I kind of wish it was something different than my social security number and birthday. The world has, my husband has a security clearance and they gave it away. But I think there should be something more than the stuff that's on the form that we hand to our client anyway.
Yeah, I mean, they just want to verify who they're talking to is what it is, because, you know. Yeah. So anyway, we are verifying, and that's the reason why they had so many fraudulent 2048s and 8021s filed. They were just people who were anything to get information. You know, it's all identity theft is what it is. People are doing anything to get the information. It's why it's so difficult to get into the IRS site to get information, transcripts or anything.
So now the software company requiring driver's licenses. So, I mean, yeah, but for the states. So New York required it last year, and now my software is requiring driver's licenses for every client for identity.
You don't think you can talk software issues?
No, what I'm saying is that's supposedly a second layer for identity.
Yeah.
But they can't validate those driver's licenses. I mean, as far as being able to e-file, they can't. They can't verify the driver's license is matching. You know, so I don't know what good that really is.
You know, it all depends where you are and stuff like that. You know, if some of you think you have a bad, try working in a very busy city with a transit neighborhood, and think of how many different people they get walking in their door every day. We have another one, so again in the back. Anyway, there are bad data breaches. I'm gonna go on.
Data breaches.
Yeah.
Is there any statistical information indicating whether the data breaches came from wired services? In other words, I have a hardwired internet. You know, I don't go wireless because I think there's more exposure there. But I'd be interested to know if there's any statistical research saying that it's easier to breach a wireless office than it is to breach a wired office.
I have not seen anything one way or the other on that. I don't have that type of information. I do know there's been many different ways that they've gotten information, everything from ransomware right down to just, as I said, someone just copying information and walking out the door with it. Like that. Was that a question? Use the mic, please.
At the IRS meeting back in May that I went to, they were talking a lot about this data breaches, and they had a screen from the black web or whatever it is, dark web.
Yes.
Of a tender who was, they said they were selling like, I don't know, 25 records for $4,000. Did mention that, or that used wire, you know, that had a network were more susceptible to data breaches than people who just used a standalone computer.
If you have a standalone, you know, you don't have internet and stuff like that attached to it, so you don't have any way for someone to get to your computer. Yeah, but there are ways, but yeah, the more spread out, the more open computers you have, the more access to a system, yes. It depends on how you're operating and stuff like that, you know. And whether you encrypt your files or anything else. So you want to make sure that you're doing everything you can. And as we talked about, make sure you timely report it as fast as you can to minimize the damage that can be done. Okay. So you have to act quickly. As I said, you're going to notify Mary Hansen, who's the local stakeholder liaison. The data theft information is on the tax professionals page on the irs.gov. If you just type in data breach, you're going to get everything that you need on it. There's also, there's a website, identitytheft.gov. I don't know if you're aware of that. There's a lot of information on that. I myself think it's sad that there is a website, identitytheft.gov, but there is. That's how prevalent everything is nowadays. You want to contact the authorities as appropriate. This is a big deal. You have to contact your state authorities as well. There's a link for the states who to contact. If you go in and type in that data breach, you'll find that you can go by your states. So if you have clients, depending on where your clients are, with Massachusetts, New Hampshire, Rhode Island, Connecticut, whatever, you have to contact each state that might be affected. I'll get fraudulent state returns as well. You contact experts. If you had a data breach that you think came from the outside, not someone just stealing information out of your office, like walking out with it, you probably want to get some security people in to look at your system. And you have to contact your clients, and you might want to consider providing them services. Being a federal employee, my information's been stolen. So, they gave us coverage with, I think it was Equifax actually. So, go figure. So yeah, I've had my name, my social security number, I've had my fingerprints stolen. I mean, I don't know what they need those for, but they did. So yeah, it's all happened. Got to live with it. But just know, you might want to be offering these services. And I think lots of times if you have insurance, it covers things like this. You can actually check on that. So that's it on the data breaches. Now we're going to talk about the most serious problems in the tax system. So I told you who Nina Olson is. She's a national taxpayer advocate. She's a very passionate woman. She loves what she does. She's very, I have to admire just the passion that she has for taking care of taxpayers and looking out for their rights. And she doesn't like, I mean, she's been doing it a long time. She's very, very, very personally involved in this stuff. She runs a very tight ship. I mean, we're a small organization, but I gotta tell you, like, I didn't get my job. I waited 7 weeks for a phone call from her. So she had time in her schedule to call me to offer me a job. And that's how tight she keeps it. She wouldn't let anyone else do it. So anyway, Nina is the National Taxpayer Advocate. That's one of 4 jobs in the Internal Revenue Code is the National Taxpayer Advocate. Any guesses what the others are? Commissioner is one of them. Anyone else? No. Chief Counsel is the other one, is one of them, and Treasury Inspector General. So there's only 4 jobs listed in the code, and actually, and technically, mine would be listed as a local advocate underneath hers. So there's not a lot really specified in the code about what jobs you have to have, but this is one of them. As I said, she's appointed by the Secretary of the Treasury. When she leaves, someone will get appointed to replace her. It has to be someone who hasn't worked for the IRS in the previous 5 years. Unless they can be under the TAS, the Taxpayer Advocate Service, but not inside the IRS. And there is a push, I'll tell you, what's really kind of odd about though, she actually, technically on paper, she does report to the commissioner who evaluates her performance each year and gives her a bonus, whether she's, if she deserves one. I know one of her requests is to have that changed. She wants a straight salary like the Treasury Inspector General gets with no bonuses available because she thinks she sees a potential conflict there, not necessarily for her because she's just so, but for future ones more so. So in that section of the code, there's 2 reports she does every year. It's the annual report to Congress, and she also does the objectives report to Congress. The annual report is due December 31st. It usually has a slight extension to that, and the reason why this year was January 9th is that report is delivered in person by Nina to the Senate Finance Committee and the House Ways and Means in person before anyone else ever sees it. So no one gets, except for the people that wrote it, but so the commissioner doesn't see it. No one else gets to screen it ahead of time to say, oh, this is good, this is not. So she will first deliver it to them, and then it becomes published around 10 o'clock that morning. And she does the objectives report to Congress, and that's done in June, and that tells Congress what the taxpayer advocate is going to be looking at in the upcoming fiscal year. So those are the two reports. In addition to this, these two reports this year, they did a third report, which was called the Purple Book, which was fascinating, I gotta tell you. And what that was is, as I said, this IRS reform coming up. So it had all to do with legislative changes. A lot of them had come out of previous annual reports, but it had all the suggested legislative changes. And in the index, it listed all previous tax bills, bills that had the language in there about what they should be doing and stuff like that, in hopes that someone will revive some of these and get them passed into law this year. So recent issue reports to Congress, we're going to talk about allowable living standards, private debt collection, and the barriers on the ITIN renewals. Okay, let me back up. So the allowable living standards. So someone owes a lot of money to the IRS, and the IRS has a little formula they use to tell them how much money someone needs to live on, which is not always entirely accurate. You have a great example, I'm sure. I'm sure we all have really good examples on this one. The IRS Code Section 7122D2A mandates that the IRS develop and publish schedules of national and local allowances designed to provide the taxpayers entering into a compromise have an adequate means to provide for basic living expenses. Most importantly, Congress instructed the IRS to analyze the facts of each case involving these allowances and stipulated that if an application of the allowances results in a taxpayer not being able to provide for basic living expenses, then the allowances should not be used. The resulting allowable living expense standards have come to play a major role in analyzing several types of IRS collection cases. By focusing on what expenses are allowable instead of adequate, the IRS has exercised its discretion in a way that does not meet congressional intent, since allowable is not synonymous with adequate or basic instead. The IRS should adopt standards that allow for sufficient or adequate standard of living. The Taxpayer Advocate previously recommended that the IRS expand the allowable living expenses to include childcare, an allocation for a basic home computer, and minimum retirement savings as acknowledgement that these expenses are necessary for maintaining the health and welfare of today's family. The Taxpayer Advocate is studying the possibility of considering other expenses. For instance, in the United Kingdom, the minimum income standard is defined as the income that people need in order to reach a minimum socially acceptable standard of living in the UK today, based on what members of the public think. The MIS definition allows for social and cultural participation expenses, which include things such as gifts and recreation. Taxpayer Advocate will research the ability to include a small allotment for entertainment and recreation. Additionally, Taxpayer Advocate will research an allowable expense for higher education or trade school. And then we're going to share the results with the IRS once we conclude with that study. We have a comment in the back here. Wait for the mic, please, so the people that are not in the room can hear.
My biggest complaint about the national standards are that they're not reflective of reality for the following reason. They get the national standards from a factor of the consumer price index and other relations issues. It takes a whole year for those price indexes to be analyzed and determined. They put them in and they say, okay, we're going to publish them now. Now we give them to the IRS. They're already over a year and a half, 2 years old, when they finally give them to the IRS. And those are the standards, and including inflation, that the IRS uses. And it's inadequate because they're trying to have the tail wag the dog. They're trying to catch up with ancient history, and it's inadequate given the fast amount of inflation. This is my biggest complaint. And when we had the IRS's ear a number of years ago, I brought the point out that if you check the index and you check to see how long it takes for the IRS to catch up with that information, they're almost 2 years old. You know, I said to someone, I wouldn't mind paying gasoline prices that I was paying 2 years ago. And then, of course, that unfortunately was a time when it was down, and when it was up, it's a problem. But I mean, there's not a realistic adjustment for inflation in those national standards, so they're completely inadequate.
Well, yeah, there is
Isn't that
there is
what
a
it's saying?
time lag. There's also, being in a particular geographic area we are and stuff like that. And as you know, like rents, home prices, everything fluctuate greatly depending about where you are and stuff like that. If you have to be near a cheese stop or something, like you're paying a lot more than if you're like, 2 miles down the road or something. And but you have to be near the cheese stop if you can't walk 2 miles to get to work every day, like to get the tea to get to work and stuff. So there's a whole bunch of issues that come up in these, and we really do try to, if you get really stuck on some of those collection cases, we'll try to advocate to try to get either the revenue officer or automated collections to try to say, we'll take this amount instead because you're showing. I mean, we really do try to show that the expenses aren't that bad, and it all depends on what your circumstances are. Sometimes you have the amount you owe isn't necessarily reflective of what your current situation is. We saw a lot of that with the big cancellation of debt issues. People have these big balances, they have nothing left, and don't always qualify for an offer and things like that. So there are a lot of issues with the living standards. We're really trying to work with that. We think it's being abused for them to say, nope, you can only have this much for, this much for your vehicle, this much for your housing and stuff like that. It doesn't make sense when someone like, we can't say you can only have $1,000 for rent if you're paying $1,200 now and it's going to cost you $4,000 to move somewhere where you can get a cheaper rent. It doesn't make sense, So you really have to, push the button sometimes and say, this is all we can do right now. Were there any other questions on that? So know that we are looking at it. We think it's a serious problem. Private debt collection. You guys have probably heard a lot about this lately, haven't you? It's we're on our third try in private debt collection. The IRS is. Hopefully it's going to be strike 3 and you're out. But the IRS implemented a new private debt collection on May 17th, 2017. There's 4 private agencies around the country, 2 of them in New York. And one's in California and the other one's in Iowa, I think. These numbers look a little bit old. There's a couple issues going on with this. First of all, the IRS had sent over about it was just under $1 billion to these agencies to collect. And they collected about 9 million out of that billion. So not a lot. And a lot of the cases they sent over were people who really can't pay their taxes. A lot of those currently not collectible people got sent over. People that are on fixed income, Social Security, and things like that. The IRS has what they call a low income filter, and it's 250% of poverty. So it's around 31,000 right now. So we figure if someone is living on 31,000 a year, they probably can't afford to pay their back taxes. We don't usually chase them. They sent a lot of those cases over too. I know. So these people, they tend to be a little less educated. A lot of them tend to be elderly and not. So you think if someone's calling you, anyone in this room, you pick up your cell phone, someone's calling you, you don't recognize the number, you don't answer it. But you know who answers it? My mother and other people like her. So these are the people that are getting sucked into talking to these private debt collectors. Not that she owes taxes, but should probably carry on a conversation for a half hour and say, oh, who is this? But anyway, it's people who can't afford to pay it are getting sucked into making payments or signing up for installment agreements that they're never going to be able to support. They think they're doing the right thing, but if you agree to pay $100 a month and you're living on $1,100 a month, what do you like? It doesn't work. So anyway, we think they picked on the wrong people. It has been very non-cost effective. The outlays for this program have been $20 million. They spent $20 million to collect 7, of which the Treasury only got 5 because we had to pay 25% to the private debt collectors that collected it. The IRS gets to keep 25% of that money too. So there is a real push to get it to work on both sides. So only half the money they collect is ever going to the Treasury to pay what you want it to pay. So So we have an issue with it. We're really, the whole part about the poor taxpayers getting picked on, they're promised to apply that filter at some time and not send those cases over in the future. But I will tell you what's happening now is that, you know, in the past that your clients, when they file their tax return and they got the first notice saying you owe this much money, then the next one you owe this much money, and then the third one says, it's a notice of intent to levy. We're gonna, you know, we're getting more serious here. So, and I don't have the numbers right in front of me, but it was about during those time frames, they collect like 4 billion after the first notice goes out and stuff like that. Well, the plan is to issue that first notice and then turn them over to collection agencies this year. And part of the reason is the collection lines, the phone lines that aren't being staffed anymore because there's no budget. The budget's down 20% since 2010. It has to come from somewhere. It's coming from everywhere now. So there's nobody answering the phone. So the people who owed money to the IRS that called the collection line, they answered 45% of the calls with an average wait time of 47 minutes. Think of any other business that you would call if you're trying to make a payment arrangement. Are you going to wait on the phone that long? I mean, add to the mix, you get all these people now concerned about their passports and everything else. There's a lot more people wanting to, you know, maybe be a little bit more upfront with the IRS and not have to be chased down. So there's a lot of issues going on with collection with the IRS, and a lot has to just do with staffing. You know, there's a general push right now to hopefully get additional funding, and we'll see what happens. But the phone lines are really a problem, especially if you owe money. You may have seen reports about how the IRS level of service increased last year. They were into like 79% of the calls or something like that. But they had 25 million fewer calls is what it was the one time. Like the courtesy disconnect, yes. Yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah. We were talking about the courtesy disconnect for those at home. Yes, it's a real thing. Sorry. You call up, you wait, and then you just politely get hung up on. So anyway, we have a problem with who got turned over for private debt collection. And then I don't know if you do that much work with ITINs and stuff like that, but okay. So we do have some people that do. So the IRS, and I'm sorry, I don't have the numbers in this particular report. Last year, they dumped a whole bunch of ITINs. These are people who need a number to file taxes, either for themselves or for their dependents. They had ITINs because they can't get Social Security numbers. If they hadn't been used for 3 years, I think the deadline, in the last 3 years, they were dumped. If they were issued during a particular time frame in the late 90s, they were dumped. Like they just dumped like 13 million of these numbers off the record. So people tried to use them, they couldn't use them anymore.
They also got rid of the international organizations that were allowed to basically certify that a client, that somebody needed an ITIN. And now people living overseas have to go to the US Embassy. This is a burden.
It is.
And worse, E-Trade decided to send out a 1099 to a Japanese man who works for a Japanese company living in Japan because they misrepresented him as under the US company that it's a subsidiary of. And they took $20,000 and the guy had to take a 2-hour train ride to get to the US Embassy to get his ITIN. And by the way, the IRS won't give him back the money because they don't have a record that his ITIN is tied to that money because he got it afterwards, and E-Trade is, insert expletives, not doing a thing.
Yeah, we've had a number of those cases.
ITIN is, he is fortunately has enough money and is an engineer and had the capability to get there, but I think, oh my, 2 hours each way.
Yeah, I've seen those cases, and it's not, and I actually saw someone who actually sent in all this stuff notarized, and it turns out notarized isn't good enough. It has to be certified, which I don't even understand the whole total difference. I had to read it in a manual, but.
The US Embassy has to give you a stamp certified raised that has to be mailed with everything.
Yeah.
And you're working with somebody where English isn't the first language.
Mm.
It's really a burden. And I essentially think that the IRS says, well, you're not a US citizen, we don't care.
You have those situations also, not just each, but if someone has real estate in the country that they're selling, you could have someone who doesn't live here and like inherited property or something, and they turn around and sell it, and 20% is getting withheld and sent off to, it goes to Fresno or wherever, and people are trying forever to get it back because they can't get the necessary information. But yeah, it happens. Or they have to get that number. They thought they had a number, now they don't have a number. They have to get a new number and everything else. So then they can't sell the property. It's just a whole big cycle. So most of those people didn't know the numbers were being dropped either. They weren't told. If they hadn't used it for a number of years, think if you got an ITIN because you were selling property and you turn around and sell property again 5 years later. Well, you didn't use it for 3 years. We didn't think you were using it anymore. But so it's been a problem. And it's stopping a lot of people from being able to do what they want to be able to do. So that is a problem. I would like to say I've seen a few of those cases. Fortunately, one of the few cases we don't actually work in Boston. They almost all go to Philadelphia because that's where the unit is set up. So I don't know if you know, so I told you we have multiple offices. We have 2 here in Massachusetts. And each state has their own taxpayer advocate office, and we usually work our local cases. And Andover used to do different types of work than we did in Boston, but now we do the actual same type of work. And it all depends usually where the taxpayer lives. And the way the state is pretty much split up is if your taxpayer lives in the 018 or 019 zip code area, those cases usually go to Andover, and I have the rest of the state coming to Boston. It's just kind of a brief breakdown of the way we do it. So, and that can, depending on inventory levels, like switches, they can say, sorry, these 2 towns are going over there and whatever, because we try to balance out the inventory for all our case advocates. I think this is pretty much what I have on this PowerPoint. So I'll just elaborate on that a little bit more. There's 2 sides to the taxpayer advocate. We have case advocacy and we have systemic advocacy. So case advocacy didn't make this PowerPoint, but that's where I work. So I have to tell you about it. So if we work with individual taxpayers on their individual situations. We have 2 basic criteria for getting into the IRS. The first is a hardship. If a taxpayer is going through a particular hardship, and it does not have to be of the IRS making, it can just be because they're poor. They don't have any money to pay their rent or something like that. We will assist those taxpayers however we can to expedite their refunds, to help them with the EITC audit, whatever it is. We will work with those taxpayers if they're experiencing a hardship. There's a couple of other little requirements there. And a lot of the cases that we do with those particular taxpayers, especially this time of year, this week actually is our big week coming up. There's a program that we do, we advocate for these taxpayers with the IRS. If they owe federal taxes, and the IRS is going to hold that refund to pay the federal taxes, we'll advocate for to the IRS to allow the taxpayers to get that refund if they're behind on their mortgage or their rent or some other real financial hardship. Those are the only times the actual taxpayer has to prove the hardship so we can show it to the IRS. Other than that, we usually just take a taxpayer's word that they're having troubles. And the other big issue that we do with taxpayers, if taxpayers are waiting, and this is where most of you send your cases in, if you're working and you've gone 30 days past the due date of an IRS response. So it depends on what the actual time frame is on something. If you file an amended return, the frame is 8 weeks or whatever, it goes the next 30 days and we'll get involved. I don't know all the time frames in front of my, or if you get a notice from the IRS saying we're going to resolve this in such and such time and they don't respond to you after that, those are the kinds of situations we get involved. And we'll take, we take all these cases in, and we do actual case work on individual cases. And what happens when we do those cases is they all get coded in a particular way depending on what the issue is. And we look at those cases either as the individual case advocate that works the case, or as someone who's looking at a broad spectrum of the cases, and we see if there's any systemic issues going on. And we take that information, we funnel that up when there are problems that are affecting and determine what is affecting multiple taxpayers. And we ask that the tax community do this as well. So if you have several taxpayers getting tripped up with the same problem, or just even 2 of them, or if you think it might be affecting even more than what your particular taxpayer is, we ask that you report it. And so systemic advocacy, so if you go on the Taxpayer Advocate site or even irs.gov and just type in SAMS, S-A-M-S, it will bring it to the site where you can report an issue. And what we ask you to do is report the issue and give your contact information. You don't put the taxpayer's information in there. We don't want any sensitive information in there. But someone will actually read it and they'll call up and they'll say, can you tell me, can you give me the taxpayer's social security number so I can actually look at the account and see what's going on there? So maybe I can help determine whether or not it's really a systemic problem or not. And this is how we find out a lot of things that are affecting multiple taxpayers. One of the problems that they identified this way was if you had joint taxpayers that were filing an extension to file their return, and they were joint in 2016, they filed the extension for 2017, and then they didn't file jointly again, or they switched the order of the social security numbers. The extensions weren't getting recognized. So that's one of those issues that came up in the system. So they could actually now, they cross-reference all of them. So if you file an extension for 2 social security numbers, it's getting plugged into both of them. So that's one of those issues, but you could have other ones that come up. So if you see anything, you really want to do everyone a favor by reporting it. We look at the information. We have a whole team that does nothing but looks at these and tries to decide what is the real problem. And this is how we come up with a lot of those problems that make it into the annual report and get addressed by Congress. So I highly encourage you to do it. If you're not sure, you can still put it up there. Someone's going to contact you. They'll try to flesh it out. And you might have the problem today, and someone else might have the problem tomorrow, and someone else might, and someone's saying like, we got 3 of these. Like they're very similar. We're going to maybe look at this a little bit better. Another issue they had a big problem with recently with the collection statutes being extended way beyond when they should have been. What was happening is there were certain actions that extend a collection statute. One of them is if they file an offer in compromise, and others if they file for an installment agreement. And usually they file for an installment agreement, and it's usually worked like within a month or 45 days or something. But a lot of these we just say like, oh, they put the request in that they want an installment agreement. They didn't act on it. They didn't act on it for years, and the statute kept expiring. They had some that were like 8 years past the regular collection statute. So until someone points that out, no one can really do something about it. So when you run into these situations, like you mentioned there, you have a taxpayer, you think the collection statute should be gone. Well, someone can look at it, and if it hasn't already been cleared, then maybe there was a problem on that account. And if they say, you know what, something extended it, you have to say, well, what extended it, so I can look at that, because it shouldn't have gone that long. So there were different issues that can come up. So if you see any of them, say something, and let it get addressed. So as I said, it's irs.gov/SAMS. That's how you get there. We put information on there, practitioners put information on there. Anyone can put information on there automatically. We have a lot of work done by low-income taxpayer clinics that put information up there and stuff like that. So you just submit the information. Someone from there will contact you to get the details. So it's no taxpayer information, just a general problem of what's going on. Any questions on that? Anyone use it? Yeah, yay. Maybe next time I'll see more hands. Okay, questions for me? Sure. Mike?
Okay. My first one is, and I know this isn't the IRS's fault, but there are forms that are still not available for this year.
Oh, you're referring to the recent.
Yes. Now, I know that
extensions?
some of them are because of the February 9th thing, and some of those have actually come out. I can't even get an 8936, and it was not changed in tax reform, and it was not changed on February 9th. So I'm okay, and
you're
I'm
gonna have to enlighten me. 8936.
8936 is my electric car. This, by the way, is
Okay.
personal because it's going to be thousands of dollars.
I thought they were getting rid of that one, no?
No.
Okay.
No, you're not. because it was promised for this year and I bought my car. Anyway, here's the problem. It's not that, I mean, we understand like tuition deduction that happened February 9th, blah, 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 blah. We understand that. The problem is there's no way to know when it's going to come out. So I saw the tuition deduction did come out, but like, so I was on the phone with practitioner priority line for something else. And I said, by the way, do you guys know? And they went, we're not done yet. I said, no. And they looked and they go, oh, we don't have anything here either. So I think, and I say this again with sympathy because we know it's not the IRS's fault. It was when legislation passed, but it would be helpful to know when these are coming out. So even with like clients, I'd have to say, you're on hold. I can't tell you when. And what happens when April 14th comes around and I still don't have my 8936? I can't do it by hand. I have to do a Schedule D and an AMT.
Okay, I have a couple, again, I'm not familiar with that particular form.
But it's all, you know what I mean?
It is a form that has to be revised each year, because not every form actually has to be.
I didn't think it did, and they have a draft, and they've had a draft since September.
Okay.
But that's, I mean, like I said, that's just one. The tuition deduction came out. I don't know if the energy credit came out. And PMI's out, energy credit's not out. So I guess the issue here is if somewhere somebody could say, here's where they are, here's the expected delivery date, we'd have something we could tell the clients and be prepared for and know where there's issues.
You know, as far the particular form you're asking about, I don't know what's going on with that one. I can try to look at it by end and I can ask. My office in Boston, the gentleman who works in the very next office is on the systemic side. I could ask him if they've seen anything on this yet, or if he knows anything about it.
It's a general form question because we, of course, probably all blame our software first. But the truth is some of it's from the IRS and there's no place to find the status of the forms on the IRS website.
Yeah. Again, I'm not making the forms, but a lot has to do with late changes. That one I can't understand why it's not out though. If nothing changed in the law.
And my next one is, you know that combat injured veterans who had to leave the service are supposed to get a letter before December 2017 from DOD that allows them to amend back and get their severance treated as non-taxable instead of taxable because it was incorrectly treated as taxable. And DOD has never sent the letters out. And I'm curious, would the taxpayer advocates be able to help in any way? I've already talked to Nikki Songas's office and they called DOD. I'm just curious if you can help.
I can't think they would actually be able to assist with that particular matter. So we do a lot of work with the congressional offices. Nikki Songas's office actually works with Chris in Andover, not with me.
Maybe that's what we want to use SAMs for.
You can.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can, you know, issues like that you want to put up and stuff like that because, you know, you do want people to be able to make a claim. And in your particular situation, if you have these veterans that need this letter to make the claim, I would file a protective claim while you can.
Hey, has the Taxpayer Advocate Service ever commented to Congress about the need to regulate the tax preparation industry?
Not regulate. I think we're. I think that's the wrong word. I think minimum education requirements.
Yeah, that would be.
Have been proposed.
That would be a good start.
I believe that was in the Purple Book. There were 51 recommendations in that book. I got to tell you, that's not one I keyed in on, to be honest. I could share that with you though when I get back to the office. I'll check on that. But I think that was in. I'm pretty sure that was in there. There were a couple others I was pushing more strongly for. You know, with my 15 minutes per congressman or whatever I had, up to 45. But
all right. Well, that is great, Bob.
Anybody else? So I do want to offer, so if any of you actually have particular cases that you think I am more than willing to take information on a one-on-one, and I can either have you fill out a 911 or whatever. If something you think I might be able to just look up and resolve, I can try to do that as well. I haven't hooked my computer up yet, but I could try to do that and see if I can't get you an answer on it. I'd be more than happy to help you. I don't have anything after this.
All right, and you're on the 7th floor.
I'm on the 7th floor,
of the
hidden away, yes.
Yep, and your phone number is right there on the website.
Yes. Okay, true confession, I had a pile of stuff on my desk yesterday that I was supposed to take with me when I left, including business cards and publications, and it's still sitting there. I came from home, sorry. I can get anything out to you that you need. I think you all got an email with my information on there. My phone number is 617-316-2625. If you had the previous Taxpayer Advocate's phone number, it's the same. They wouldn't let me have my own. I did inherit one.
All right, and that number again is?
617-316-2625. Okay. No. So I will tell you, like, if you have a new case that's coming in, we have a woman locally that answers the phone in Boston. We have an intake line, 617-316-2690, I believe. And there's also the toll-free, the 1-877-77, I got it somewhere. The toll-free advocate number, that's honestly usually your best bet. There's whole groups of intake advocates. And the reason I say it's your best bet, because if it's a very simple inquiry, they can handle it right there on the spot. And they might be able to do something without having to even create a case and waiting for 3 to 7 days for someone to get back to you on it. That's why I strongly encourage that toll-free number, because the person answering the phone is more experienced and better equipped to handle very quick closures, and we'll do it. So anyway, yes, I am available. More than happy to help anyone in a particular tax case, and I'll see what I can do. Thanks.
Bob, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
So March 22nd is Share Shop. Bring your tax questions, those perplexing cases that are causing you to stay up at night. And it also is a good reason to come and see Joyce Moore, because she will be here. And you get the EA Survival Cookbook. It's irresistible. So hope to see you next month.
Oh, one last thing before you leave. Just so you know, I was invited here. I am free of charge. If you ever have another event or something, any of you and other organizations, or if you do anything at all with the elderly, with the poor, the English as a second language, any of the groups that really have trouble representing themselves, if you have any events going on with them and you think I might be of assistance, let me know. I'll see what I can do. Thanks.
I know you didn't bring anything with you. Can you send things?
I can, absolutely. Do you have a particular problem going on now? Or?
I have a client, immigrant status, English not so good.
Okay.
Had some issues. He's in a repayment plan, which is kind of over his head.
Okay.
So I'd like to see if we could get